Okay, okay, boss. Sorry, நானே என்ன மியூட் பண்ணிட்டேன்.
Are the slides visible?
Yes, madam. Slides are visible. No problem, madam. Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Without much delay, I'll start off straight away. At this juncture, I thank the organizers of this Pulse for practicing pediatricians for including me in today's session. It is in fact an enigmatic topic. I'll try to do justice to it. So my child is not eating is a very common problem which is encountered by each and every pediatrician in the office practice. So what could be the issue? So in this 1 hour, we will discuss as to what are the causes that could be the reasons for a child not eating as per the mother's statement. And then we'll try to give an approach to this problem. First and foremost, it could be, we have to find out whether it is a fact or a fallacy. We are yet to see mothers who are so satisfied with the dietary intake of their child. So first and foremost, we have to find out whether the statement is true or false. Then the next step would be to ask history by one-day recall method about the dietary intake of the child over the last 24 hours. There they will meticulously tell you about what was eaten for breakfast, what was eaten for lunch, and what for dinner. But they'll gloriously avoid the snacking. Probably they do not know that snacks have much calorific value and they will avoid it. So we have to go into the depth of the history to find out what are the snacks taken and what's the time interval between the snack and the next meal. And if there is any junk food at all. And what are they? Then many children are obsessed with carbonated drinks, especially during the summer months. And we in India, we have a monotonous menu, dosas or idlis for the morning and rice for the afternoon, with a few stipulated gravies which come on meticulous rotation, and dinner which is again idli or dosa. So the child gets irritated with this monotonous menu and boredom strikes him. And there are plenty of food fads in a family at large or in the child in particular. When food fads are usually associated with the child alone and not in the family as such, this would be due to mainly the improper weaning practices. May be delayed in time or not actually done as it is said to be. And there could be wrong knowledge, attitude, and practice in the family regarding the foodstuffs. Sometimes they could use all good foodstuffs, but then they would deep fry. And then all the nutrients would be lost. They'll add plenty of oil that would give satiety. And so this would be for the snacks, especially bhajis and botas. And the child will not be able to take the next meal. Child could be a picky eater who chooses only certain foodstuffs to eat and avoids the rest of them. And some children have a reluctance to try anything new. Children also have a psychology and they may be depressed over some issue, maybe at school that happened, about an event that happened at school or at home front, some sibling related issues or something, and they would not be just in the frame of mind to eat. And that shouldn't be brought as a big problem. And sometimes there is unpleasant meal time. Only when the child, especially the older child or the adolescent, sits at the dining table to eat his dinner, the entire family hovers around him or her and talks about all the negative things that happened related to the child, such as this child didn't help in household chores, the child did not, was all the time glued to the TV or the mobile phone or some other electronic gadget, did not study well, etc., etc. So the child gets really irritated, just leaves the dining table in a furious mood within, halfway through. So this is happening, that happens in most of the families. What other issues could be there? Improper weaning techniques. If a child is not started on complementary feeding after the 6th month of life, then the negativistic attitude comes around 10th month and the child will not be able to take up anything. The child will refuse. And this is not known to the mother, and the mother tries to force the child to feed. And a temper tantrum occurs and a vicious cycle sets in. Pacifiers. Pacifiers, they have a negative influence on the ability of the child to try out new food substances. If the not eating well, not eating is of acute onset, it could be just a sore throat in a toddler who does not have verbal capacity yet. And so, due to the pain that occurs with each gulp of food, the child quietly avoids the food. Or the child could be having an underlying or an evolving hepatitis in progress. Worm infestations can happen, especially in the toddler age group, which reduces the appetite. Pica, worm infestation, anemia, they go hand in hand with each other. And when we often deworm, most of the time, just one shot of this albendazole is given, and 3 months later, again only it is repeated. But albendazole predominantly, it is going to tell upon only the adult worms and not the larvae. And so it roughly takes 2 weeks time for the larvae to mature into adults. So if we repeat the deworming agent 2 weeks later after the first dose, then the results may be better. Anemia of nutritional onset or any other anemia like an ongoing hemolytic process could also cause congestion of the gut wall, especially the hemoglobin is going to be less than 6 grams per deciliter, and this could tell negatively upon the appetite. Gastroesophageal reflux disease in infancy is not an uncommon problem. Sometimes the child may be a known case of ventricular septal defect or not at all diagnosed only at first instance by us. And there may be an incipient congestive cardiac failure. If there are not floral symptoms like tachypnea, tachycardia, and edema, we tend to avoid anti-failure medications. But at times when the echo, if it is done and it shows a bit of congestive cardiac failure, prompt institution of anti-failure treatment could improve the appetite. What could be the other issues which may lead to a child not eating? One is palatopharyngeal incoordination. When such is the history, the mother may not know it. She would say that the child is keeping the bolus of food at the mouth for a longer time than usual. Or after that, the child is forced, the food is forced into the child's mouth, child spit out. So this is the history the mother gives. But then if such is so, then we have to go back to the neonatal history, the birth-related events, and find out whether there was a hypoxic element at birth, whether the child had a not so smooth neonatal transition. It could be one of the early predictors of an evolving cerebral palsy, especially in a mid-infant. Autism spectrum disorders may sometimes present as feeding problems. These children are picky eaters. If it is in the long run that the child refuses to eat much, then it could be due to a hypothyroidism which is undiagnosed. 1 or 2 instances we in our hospital at ENT OPD have seen foreign bodies like impacted fish bones, lodged either in the tonsillar fossa or in the piriform fossa, especially in a toddler who does not eat because it causes discomfort and pain with each morsel of food. When we face a child with short stature, an older child with short stature, with sort of bony deformities, and ultrasound shows contracted kidneys, then we could be dealing with a chronic kidney disease. In our country, not eating well, we should not forget tuberculosis. It can take various forms and shapes. Sometimes an occult malignancy can present as loss of appetite alone to start. Now, I'll just give a word about the rare organic causes of feeding issues. Russell-Silver syndrome, 1 or 2 cases we have seen. These children present with short stature, it is an intrauterine growth restriction which spills over into the postnatal period. The child has inverted triangular faces and asymmetry. There is oral motor dysfunction, so the child has poor appetite, fussiness, and is a slow feeder. Noonan syndrome, we know it is a male Turner phenotype who has got pulmonary stenosis. But literature says that these children also rarely could present as a feeding problem. They could be slow eaters because they can have an element of foregut dysmotility. In our hospital, way back last year, we had a 75-year-old, 75-day-old infant who presented with an element of mild failure to thrive and sucking at the breast only for hardly 5 minutes. And the observant mother had noticed a visible gastric peristalsis. She says a mass comes from the left costal margin and descends beneath the right costal margin. So it was a girl baby, firstborn. But anyhow, we thought infantile hypertrophic pyloric stenosis has to be ruled out. But the ultrasound did not pick up infantile hypertrophic pyloric stenosis. Then we thought that we could put the child on esomeprazole, and it could be a case, as it could be a case of gastroesophageal reflux disease. And so the child improved. The peristalsis, which was visible, also disappeared. This child never had vomiting, protracted vomiting at all. Then the child was discharged home within a week. But we were shocked to see the child at the intensive care unit with protracted vomiting 10 days later, back with again the visible gastric peristalsis. Then we went to the radiology department and discussed. They repeated the ultrasound, nothing was made out. Then they said they would do a barium meat series. They picked out a duodenal web. The web was operated and the child got better. Among the neurological disorders, congenital mammalian myopathy may present with feeding difficulties, especially affecting the swallowing aspect. Since it's a congenital myopathy to present early in infancy, and since it is neurological, a multidisciplinary assessment is required. Feeding disorder in infancy and early childhood. If it is not organic, what can it be? It could be a mental disorder. So Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, Roman number 4, has given certain diagnostic criteria for feeding disorder in infancy and early childhood. There are 4 criteria, all of them should be fulfilled. That is, persistent failure to eat adequately for at least 1 month with significant failure to gain weight or in fact weight loss. That is failure to thrive, no intake of food for at least a month. The next point being not due to any gastrointestinal disorder of primary origin or any other general medical condition like the ventricular septal defect that I spoke of. Or it should also not be accounted for another developmental disorder like a rumination disorder. The onset has to be before the age of 6 years. So these are all the criteria given by DSM-4 in relation to feeding disorder in infancy and early childhood. Now, for us, it is our bounden duty to find out whether not eating well is a fallacy really. How are we to start off like that? We must ask the date of birth of the child and the exact age can be calculated. Then we should go by the IAP growth charts for boys and girls accordingly. We have an integrated 0 to 18 chart. Blue for boys and pink for girls. We are all well aware of it. We should plot the weight centiles and the length of the height centiles, as the case may be, on those charts. And if the same pediatrician is seeing the child sequentially over a period of time, by plotting thus at each visit, there would be weight velocity and length or height velocity also. If there is no crossing over of centiles downward, then there is no cause for concern. It is just a fallacy. So this is the IAP growth chart for boys 0 to 18 years, where we have age on the x-axis and the weight in the first set of graphs on the y-axis and height or length in the second set of graphs on the y-axis again. So third centile, 10th, 25th, 50th, 75th, 90th and 97th. So 50th is the median, but then that doesn't matter. If you plot over a period of time, if the child is not crossing the centiles or dipping the centiles downward, then there's no cause for concern. This is a pink chart for girls. Then is the child snacking heavily or is there intake of junk food? For this, a detailed dietetic history has to be taken and analyzed. And now, with thanks to Corona, sedentary lifestyle has become the order of the day, and children are all glued to online education, and there's no sporting activity because they don't go to school. Unless the parents think of this and weigh the pros and cons of Corona on one hand and obesity on the other hand, sedentary lifestyle on the same hand, then they will realize the importance of going in for exercise. Online education has taken a toll on the children, and as the monotony kills them in front of the electronic gadget for 4 to 5 hours. Although government regulations have come, there are schools who stringently follow 5 to 6 hour classes every day. These children, they snack sideways as the online classes are going on, and they become couch potato. Nowadays, they say the pillow effect has happened. The pillow effect has given way to the couch potato, in the sense that couch potato has a shape, at least for the head and neck. The pillow effect, everything is the same, like a vertical rectangular figure. Again, children again should have their own psychological issues. It could be due to peer pressure, sibling rivalry, parental pressure, broken home, and whatnot. So children can go into depression. Depression can either increase or decrease the appetite of the child. The single girl child is given whatever she or he asks for, and so junk food and snacking heavily could be the issue. And later, especially when there are grandparents in the house, the snacks are not at all taken into account as a mini meal. In fact, they will be the mega meal. And within an hour of that snacking, maybe at 6 o'clock, the child snacks. By 7:30 or 7 o'clock, the child is expected to eat a full meal. So the child will not have appetite for the dinner. Sometimes it's an overprotective child who might have had a stormy neonatal period, or the child might have had some grave illness from which the child might have recovered from a life and death situation. Such are the children who are overprotected by their parents, and they are given snacks as treats and junk food, pizzas, parattas, and whatnot. And now anemia. Anemia could reduce the appetite. Anemia could be usually due to lack of micronutrients, mainly iron, B12, and folic acid in various combinations. And whenever a child does not eat solids enough due to improper weaning practices, late introduction of complementary feeds, the child gets glued to the breast milk and thereafter the cow's milk. So the mother feels let the child drink at least the cow's milk. Child is not eating any solids. So she gets more and more of cow's milk, more than 500 ml per day. This results in iron deficiency anemia by the phytate effect. So that could be one reason for anemia, excess cow's milk more than 500 ml per day. When children in our own hospital here in the government sector are admitted for intercurrent illnesses like diarrheal disease or bronchopneumonia, whenever we do a baseline complete blood count, we are of late seeing over the last 2-3 years a lot of hemoglobin values only settling around 7.5 to 8 grams per deciliter. So then we go into the history, they say cow's milk intake is much more than 400 to 500 ml per day. In the rural setup, barefoot walking could be an issue, causing worm infestation. Pica could perpetuate anemia, and anemia could perpetuate pica. Then intake of diet rich in phytates like beans, nuts, and oats again could lead to iron deficiency by preventing the absorption of iron. Whenever a child is suffering from a chronic disease like a chronic liver disease or a chronic kidney disease or any chronic infection, that could be the anemia of chronic disease, which is normocytic normochronic. And other non-nutritional causes of anemia like hemolytic anemia should not be forgotten. Who is a picky eater? A picky eater is a person who refuses to eat certain types of foodstuffs and wants only the same foods again and again. Here in our setup, if our children are introduced to parotas or Maggi noodles, they want that again and again. Sensory perception issues could be there, especially when it is an autistic child. Sometimes these feeding problems could be the first symptom of an underlying autism. Because whenever they have a child with autism, an element of wishful thinking is always there in the parents. They will deny that denial that the child is not autistic. So it's very difficult to make them agree the diagnosis first. Only then interventions can start. Some children could have difficulty in chewing certain foodstuffs, and some of them could have difficulty in swallowing certain foodstuffs. So the mother is forced to feed the baby because she gets so tense. Child is not eating anything. So forced feeding leads to gagging. The so-called gagging could be the history which is given in palatopharyngeal information related to HIEC equally. The same kind of gagging history could be given whenever a child is got gastroesophageal reflux disease, or whenever there is a sharp foreign body, long-standing, long forgotten, sitting in the tonsillar fossa or the pyloric fossa. What are the sensory influences on feeding? Research has indicated that factors that influence food selectivity are, will be shocked to know it's not the taste which is predominant, it is the texture. The texture of the food accounts for 69% of the child's perception, appearance of the food 58%, taste accounts for only 45%. They have to feel it and look at it and like it, only then comes taking it and putting it into their mouth. Then only comes the smell of food, and finally the temperature. Children are not much bothered whether the food is hot or cold. Only we need to eat hot, it is hot. It's not that. Sensory seeking. So they, without understanding the pros and cons, certain junk foods will be looking good in texture and appearance. So that sensory seeking will make them go more towards those junk food. But actually, the healthy foods will be lacking in the good texture and appearance. So they tend to seek more of the junk foods, or they overeat more of them, or they cram it. Cramming is stuffing the tummy with all these foodstuffs more than it can hold, or they make unhealthy feeding choices. Now, what's the clinical approach to my child must not eat? So, if we have gone by the IAP growth charts for boys and girls, and if we have realized that it's only a fallacy, then we can just counsel the parents. And if there are behavioral issues, then parental counseling, family counseling, and counseling of the child, everything plays an important role towards good diet. If organic cause is suspected, the first and foremost comes the complete blood count to the peripheral smear. So this will be able to tell us about the anemia, the degree of anemia, the type of anemia, whether it's going to be normochromic or normocytic, which could date back to a chronic illness or a chronic infection. If it is microcytic hyperchromic anemia, complemented by the peripheral smear picture with anisocoagulophytosis, then we can think in terms of iron deficiency anemia. Then we will have a red cell distribution with which is more than 15%. Then, if it is going to be an MCV on the higher side, above 88 or so, then we will think in terms of megaloblastic anemia. Then again, we can look back at the child and see whether the child has got knuckle pigmentation or diffuse pigmentation. Any pigmentary disturbances can happen in B12 deficiency. Then the assay goes as B12 assay, folate assay, serum iron binding capacity, ferritin, and whatnot, as the case may be. So the peripheral smear and the complete blood count dictate. Liver function test, of course, when the child is not eating of acute origin and there's hepatic tenderness, then we can think of doing liver function tests. Also, when we think in terms of chronic liver disease due to a past history of jaundice, then again liver function tests may be indicated. If it's an acute insult due to hepatotropic viruses, we are going to get sky high levels of the SGOT, SGPT, 4-digit figures, usually in viral hepatitis A. Or if we are going to have a chronic liver disease, it's going to reflect as a hypoproteinemia, hypoalbuminemia, and eugenic. When we are faced with a child with short stature, with a bit of bony deformities, with or without bony deformities, and hypertension, then we have to see whether we are dealing with a chronic kidney disease. Do an ultrasound. Ultrasound shows bilateral contracted kidneys. These children will also have anemia of chronic disease because kidney is the site of synthesis of erythropoietin. So that fails. And tuberculosis workup. When we feel that the element of failure to thrive is much, then MAN 2, resting gastric juice for acid-fast bacilli, and X-ray test could be done. And when we are suspecting when there's a murmur, then we have to do the 3 basic investigations: the X-ray test, the ECG, and the echo to find out the congenital heart disease. What is it? and what impact it has on the child, whether it is causing congestive cardiac failure, what's the ejection fraction, contractility, etc. Now, how to overcome food facts? Now, all this is not there. The child is just refusing to eat because the child does not like the look of the carrot, the look of the beetroot, etc. Also, there are some children who fail to drink water. The mother says, never drinks water, able to eat everything, never drinks water. I'm so scared that dehydration will set in the summer months. So, what to do for such instances? There are children who do not eat vegetables. Then we can try cutting them raw, cutting them into attractive shapes and figures, like a teddy bear, like a star, etc. And for those who refuse to drink water, we can give them as ice cubes. For that, we should not give fruit juices. Fruit juices have to be limited. There are children who do not like the smell of milk. So milk need not be given as such. Some mothers feel that milk is different and curds is different. So ask for the surprise if eating curd will be as equivalent as eating milk, drinking milk. So we can tell them that yogurt, cheese, paneer, and flavored milk can be substituted. And meat can be given as minced, stewed meat, and eggs could be given as various recipes. Mainly, the monotony should be beaten. The child should not think that every 11 a.m. the mother will come to me with a boiled egg. Then after 4 or 5 days, the child will get irritated. If we plan to give egg at 11 a.m., egg can be made into umpteen number of recipes. So monotony has to be beaten. The children have to be attracted towards the meal. Now, what are the behavioral issues? There is a 5-step plan to manage the behavioral issues. First of all, we have to set the rules. What are the 5 rules? First is set the rules and then reward positive behavior. Whenever a child does something good in relation to diet, it should not be just taken for granted. It should not go unnoticed. The child should be rewarded for each and every positive behavior. At the same time, we have to implement strategies. The parents have to implement strategies for managing bad behavior or misbehavior. And the mealtime routine should be established. One day, the mealtime should not be at 3 p.m. in the afternoon for lunch and 4 p.m. and one day at 1:30. Then the appetite will be different at these various points of time. And preparing the parent and the child. In fact, counseling the parent is very important. This is the 5 steps. So setting up rules, the rules should be very simple, rewarding positive behavior, and implementing strategies for managing misbehavior, establishing the mealtime routine, and preparing the parent and the child for food-related advices. So how do we ask the parents to set the rules? Rules should be only 2 to 3 simple rules, not 10 commandments. So positive phrasing should be there. Should not say, if you don't eat this, I will thrash you. Should not say that. So if you eat this, you will be a good boy. So you are a good girl. I shall buy you a pencil that you asked for, or the design sharpener that you asked for. So likewise, it can be done. Involving the child in developing the rules. If the child doesn't like the rules that we implement, we can tell the child, you yourself come on, tell. Suppose you're not eating what I give today. What can I do with you? You can ask. And then there should be consistency and impartiality in following the rules. So the rules should be laid down. Any number of rules are laid down. That is what happens in India. Any number of rules are laid down. Any number of rules are broken. But when it comes to this food and dietary practices, the rules should be short and sweet. They should be few in number. They should be positively phrased, and a child should be involved in developing the rules. And then consistency should be there. And impartiality should be there. For one child, they should not say, no, it's all right if he doesn't eat, if he eats this much only. For the sibling alone, the parent should not say, no, how dare you eat this. So everybody should be treated equally in the family, and consistency should be there. And always we should emphasize on hand washing before they come to eat. And rewarding positive behavior. A descriptive and specific praise goes a long way in reinforcing positive behavior. And that's a good boy. I've never seen such a good boy like this. So these are the things that we have to tell them. And you link the rewards to the set rules. Just giving a toffee for a good behavior, the child should be able to correlate. The child should be told explicitly then and there, this toffee is for eating that vegetable salad yesterday. So the child should be able to link the reward with the set rules which the child has followed. And then we can have a chart, like what we use for enuresis chart to overcome enuresis. We have a chart. So likewise, we can have a chart to motivate the child towards good behavior by giving them stars. So these are some of the phrases that we can tell them. You're eating so well without spilling. Well done for trying the new food. This is the way positive behavior. Positive behavior need not be always rewarded by things. Can be rewarded by a compliment. Strategies for managing bad behavior. The parent should not bring the rooftop down when the child does not follow a particular set rule. The parent should be calm and clear, and they should give clear and calm instructions. Suppose a plate full of food had been served to the child, and the child has left just 1 or 2 morsels of food without eating. That should not be highlighted. Planned ignoring of the minor problem behavior has to be done. Certain things we have to ignore. Same thing holds good in life. We cannot make mountains out of molehills. We should not. So that will take us nowhere. So minor problems should be ignored. Bank on the positive aspects. And there is something called the logical consequence strategy. That is, if it is an older child or adolescent, they can be explained what would be the logical consequence of the bad behavior, which is, suppose the adolescent or the older child sat in the dining table to eat, and something happened, the child didn't like it and went halfway through without eating. Then the child should be called in and asked why the child has done this. And then we should tell that this is not the way the behavior has to be. And these consequences, this bad behavior will become a habit, and that would extend to various other contexts also, not just due to the dinner or the dining table manners. And we can also explain if the age is such that the child is reading science and vitamins and whatnot in the science. Then we can tell that if the child is not eating those protective foods, namely in the form of salads, then the child may suffer from deficiency states, as the child is now reading in the syllabus in the science class. And then whenever the child misbehaves, time out can be given. The child can be sent out for a specific period of time, not for very long hours, but each and every moment the child is kept away, the child will repent for the action done, and the child will calm down. And later, the child should be taken back into the emotional unit. Quiet time strategy is not talking to the child who's detained in the same room. The child is kept in the same room, but then the parent does not talk to the child for quite some time until the child realizes that something wrong has been done, and then the child will come and ask for pardon. So these are all the strategies for managing bad behavior. Instead of all this, if the parent starts shouting at the top of his or her voice, then the situation will totally go out of control. And then the child will also start shouting, especially if it's an adolescent, and it will become very unpleasant. Establishment of mealtime routine. There are houses where when they say dinner is served, the plate is having a mountain full of or a hillock full of rice. This should not be the way. The plate must not be filled up. And choices could be provided. There could be 2 choices at least, and any one the child could take, either tiffin or a rice. And beating the monotony is very important. We could have stable diets in the community, in the family, but then there is something called various recipes. So we can the same staple food can be made by various recipes so that monotony is beaten. And you should not reserve certain foodstuffs for the head of the family and some for the male child, or that boy will not eat that, so you eat this, you will manage with everything. All that should not be done. All the members of the family must eat the same food, and distractions have to be minimized. This is something which we are not able to control in all our households. Most of you will agree with me. Without the TV or the mobile gadget, nobody sits to eat. The favorite serial goes on for the grandparents. The father or the mother speaks on the mobile phone as they eat. The children are seeing the computer games as they eat. Otherwise, the mouth doesn't open at all. Earlier on, when we were children, we all used to sit around the table during dinner. The father, mother, sister, or brother, or who was there. And they ask what happened in your office, what happened in your school. Did you get a praise? Did this teacher scold you? Okay, don't worry, we read it up. What happened in the games hour? And what were all the jokes that happened? And all these things. This is totally lacking nowadays. And then 3 big meals are of no use. We can take 5 small meals per day. So that could be better. And then there should be a conducive family atmosphere. So the conducive family atmosphere says that everybody should have a pleasant meal time, and they should not be shouting at the top of their voices or fighting with each other as food is served. How to prepare the parent and the child? Most often it is a fussy parent. It is not the fussy child. So if you realize that the child is totally all right, the centiles are okay, the child has not got growth faltering, so it's a fallacy. And when we realize that there are no organic issues also after our workup, as the case may be, then we realize that it is only a fussy parent. Then the fussy parent has to be counseled one-to-one. And if it is a fussy child, we have to encourage the fussy parent to acknowledge the good behavior of the child as and when it happens by giving rewards. Other members of the family should comply with all the decisions taken. This is very, very important because a set of rules may be formed by the father. The mother has to agree to it. If there are grandparents in the house, they should also agree to it. Suppose the rule is broken by the child. If one parent is scolding the child, the other members say, never mind, it's okay. And they just take the child to their stride, and they comfort them and say, okay, let your father shout, don't bother. Then the child will never come into our room at all. So punishment for negative behavior must also be uniform and consistent. So this negative behavior, for example, if the father has had a good day in the office, he has got a promotion and he's coming home. The mother says to the father that the child has not eaten any good food which he has given, and he banked upon junk food totally. Then as per their rules that they have set, the child should be punished. But then the father is so happy in such a positive frame of mind, he doesn't want to alter his mood to the negative aspect. So he says, never mind, it's all right, leave him alone. But another day comes like this, the child has just left 2 morsels of food without eating. But it's all only the food given that he has eaten, it's a healthy food, but then has left back 2 or 3 morsels of food. The father gets so wild because he had such a bad day and he thrashes the boy. So this will also take the child away. Child is confused, or an older child is irritated. Children tend to follow us. So we should set examples for the children. Or the child can be made into a mini chef. Nowadays in the 4th and 5th standard itself, they are asking children to prepare lemonade for practicals, etc. So we can make the child a mini chef so that the child is able to feel responsibility and importance in planning the meal. Now, here of late, I came to know of this 108 strategy. This 108 strategy has got nothing to do with the Emergency Medical Rural Initiative. This is nothing but 1 hour of exercise and 0 junk food and 8 hours of sleep. If this 108 is followed, then children will all be healthy. Therefore, to sum up, my child is not eating is very common in office practice. The first step is to analyze whether it is a fact that the child is not eating, or it is a fallacy. For this, we go by the weight and the height centiles using standard charts. Then we have to elicit a detailed, meticulous history. Ask them by positive questions. Don't ask them to come out with what are the junk foods they have taken. So we should ask them what are all the junk foods that they took, what are all the carbonated drinks that they take, what all snacks they took. And then find out the influence of electronic gadgets, the mobile phones, any exercises there in the form of any dance classes, sport activities to spend the calories. There's nothing as such, then that becomes an issue again. There is no calorie expenditure, so no appetite. And usually, as we have seen through this presentation, the cause is usually amenable to management because they are usually behavioral, or at times it's due to faulty weaning practices or excessive clinginess to the breast in a toddler, or it could be due to improper family atmosphere which is not conducive to mealtime. And sometimes you can have organic causes. Very commonly, it is anemia and worm infestation. Rarely, it could be due to certain ominous diagnosis or surgical diagnosis, not necessarily ominous, but which need intervention. Behavior autism should never be forgotten because there are certain instances of autism which come to light only as a feeding problem. The child has got so many sensory issues. The child is in fact having a fear of seeing new foods, fear of trying new foods. Ritualistic behavior is the hallmark of autism. So they never try anything new. Especially an autistic child who does not have verbal capacity, it is very difficult to find out what are the food issues the child is suffering from. So mealtime will become a very anxious time for such a child. So all this has to be addressed. And parental counseling and family counseling play a very important role in dealing with this problem. My child is not eating. So therefore, to conclude, let us invest in early childhood nutrition. If we do so, it is a surefire strategy. The returns are incredibly high. Thank you all for being patient listening. I think I finished much before time.
Thank it is as usual slides stop பண்ணிடுங்க. Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Geetanjali. As usual, it's a good class. I think you have taken for primary pediatrician, and I think it's you have covered nicely for my child is not eating, either it's pathological and non-pathological causes, and another one is a lot of syndromes associated with not eating. That's another thing, and another one is you told, I think, growth and development. That's a very important thing. So, the child is having growth and development is not coming down. That's another percentile. I think it's good. You can almost fairly you can rule out pathological causes. And yeah, I told about the ill effect of junk food as well as another one is online education. Now is I think most of the children they are having stressed upon that online impact of online education also. Another one is I think it's as you said that anemia is commonly produced by cow milk. I think they're getting mostly that child is not eating means they get 1 or 2 liters of milk. So that one I think is you have to definitely have to ask the specific question, and you have covered I think picky plus. And important thing is the role of sensory influence on feeding. That's if a child is having autism or ADHD, other any developmental disorders, that the role of sensory issues also you have to rule out. But again, as you said, now that growth and development is very important thing prior to that going for ruled out other causes. And I clearly told that the clinical approach, that what are the suspected organic causes, I think you have to go for complete evaluation one by one. And I think, as you said, not mostly commonly we are getting iron deficiency anemia one thing. And so another thing is you have to go for liver as well as renal function test, and look for tuberculosis also. And how to overcome that food pads also you have to touch. And finally, that very important thing is treatment for behavioral issues. I think you covered all the important aspects of five parts to cover how to rate. And finally, the 108 strategies one, I think it is very useful. I think 1 hour exercise and another thing is no junk food and 8 hours sleep. It's a good thing. And I think it's a fairly covered all parts. And I want to before going for questions, I want to ask one doubt. What are the red flag signs you have to that you have to for audience? What are the red flag signs you want to tell?
Red flag signs, especially when we start off only from the IAP growth charts. If the child has got an element of failure to thrive, then we cannot call it as a fallacy. Something is really serious. So mainly this is the height and the weight center. If the weight center is mainly affected, it could be an acute problem. If the weight and the height centers are affected, then it could be a chronic problem. Then we have to do a detailed head to foot examination and find out whether we get any indicators for systemic illnesses related to the heart, liver, or kidney, chronic systemic illnesses. And then also think of any behavioral issues that detail we have to observe the child. We have to observe the child and see the behavior. Then we can really find out whether the child, and developmental milestones we have to elicit.
Yeah, that's first question. Dr. Arunachal asked, will anorexia nervosa produce feeding problem in children?
Anorexia nervosa can happen in adolescents, but when it comes to who want to maintain a body image, that can happen. But we are not very much worried about that issue in young children. It can happen in older children, especially adolescents who want to maintain their body image.
And
it can be anorexia nervosa per se, or it can be complemented by bulimia. They eat it out and vomit out. All this is adolescent behavior more than 15 years or so. It's not so common in children.
And Dr. Aswath asked,
Oh, nice, you know.
what's the role of
And here,
what is the role of appetite stimulants like cyprohepatidin in children with no organic cause and poor appetite?
don't really know. We can't prove or disprove at all. But of course, we write certain prescriptions that way. It's just to satisfy the parents, I would say. But we really don't know whether they help.
And which appetite stimulant is best in children if no organic cause is there? Another question.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't think they have any effect other than placebo effect. I'm not sure.
Yeah, as you rightly said, I think no role of appetite stimulant. I think, as you said, no. I think we can go for cyprohepatidin just like that. We can't give as a placebo. I think we can give multivitamin. You can give it, but cyprohepatidin have own effect also.
Yes.
Yeah. Another one is.
ஒரு question கேட்கலாமா கீதாஞ்சலிட்ட?
Finally, I'll come.
1 hour agabo.
Finally, I'll come. Is there any downside to give Sattu tonic as a placebo for poor appetite and growth?
No. In the growing age, we know that iron requirements are increased, and also calcium is needed. So in those prime ages, all through infancy, we can give calcium. And iron during the physiological anemia of infancy period, to prevent that, we can give. Again, 2 to 5 year age group, we can give iron. So apart from iron and calcium, multivitamin syrups, of course. But the rest of appetite stimulants, I don't think they are required. And again, during the adolescent growth spurt, we have to give iron, especially in the female children.
And any role of digestive enzyme, Dr. Sendil Kumar?
Digestive enzymes are not useful unless it is a case of malabsorption.
Okay. Dr. Jalil Ahmed sir, yeah, please.
Yeah, Dr. Geetanjali, you mentioned a very good causes of organic syndromic causes for a not eating child. One doubt for the Russell Silver babies, they have the growth hormone deficiency. Once the growth hormone replacement is done, will the appetite retain or will return to normal? Any idea?
But I don't think so, sir. Growth hormone deficiencies, the growth hormone is given for very many causes, starting from primary growth hormone deficiency to even Turner and chronic renal failure and all that. I think it only improves upon the stage, more so in primary growth hormone deficiency. I'm afraid I'm not really sure, but I think it doesn't improve the appetite as such.
Dr. Geetanjali,
Thank you.
yeah. And why we should not give junk food? I think you are, why you are against the junk food? I think for viewers' purpose.
Junk food mainly is only fat and empty calories they are. They do not have any element of protection at all. And they go only for obesity. All free radicals, fatty. The percentage is totally gone. Carbohydrate, protein, fat, percentage is totally gone. They are empty calories, oils, reheated oils.
Add
More
to
sweet
Dr.
also.
Geetanjali,
More
add
sweet
to Dr.
also.
Geetanjali, this the junks JUNK, now it has been replaced by JUNCS. This is the latest terminology. Dr. Anna Rajendran Anna asked we should avoid food additives. That the food additives are more in the junk food,
Dangerous,
like aspartame, trans fat,
monosodium
high
glutamate.
fructose corn syrup, monosodium
Yes,
gluconate. These are
Glutamate,
all
yeah.
commonly seen in the junk. So that's the reason why they have a very strong adverse effect, and it is proved scientifically.
Very
So
tasty
we
also.
don't recommend.
Very tasty also.
Very tasty and addictive.
And children will like it
Yes.
and love it.
One more thing.
Sir, adu vena sir.
Dr. Aswath, Dr.
ஆமா, அது வேண்டாம் சார். Discourage பண்ணுவோம் சார்.
your comments, Dr. Aswath.
No, I think it was a wonderful deliberation. Thank you, ma'am. I think she stuck to the topic very beautifully and showed very clearly whether there is a true appetite failure or whether it is a fussy mother rather than a fussy child. I think she deliberately, beautifully told us how to use the growth chart to convince the parents if there is no organic disease. If there is a genuine failure to thrive, madam has also given us a neat road plan and very nice take-home messages. I think she's also very convincingly told us, apart from the placebo value, there is really no need to give things like appetite stimulants or multivitamins to an otherwise well-nourished child. Overall, a very, very comprehensive and very useful preparation and presentation. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
IIPTNSC, for this. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, my pleasure.
And I think, as my suggestion, I think it's a good, it's a wonderful presentation. Actually, if you're taking it a very dry subject only, and it's presented very nicely.
Very
And,
tasty, sir.
my suggestion, you have to one slide, I think that red flag sign, that's very important.
I can add. Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's very important because it's again the not eating child is one of the exclusion only. Yeah, start with. Yeah, that's one slide. Definitely useful as a pediatrician person. Yeah,
Thank you, sir. I do.
Bala, yeah, I think it's from Madurai. Bala is there. Yeah.
I think instead of giving, madam.
Any questions, Bala?
Nothing, madam. Instead of giving
How I-
multivitamins, we can give iron syrup. It will improve uptake also. Suppose there is a mild iron deficiency.
Can't hear you well.
Hello.
Can't hear you well.
Now, madam.
Yeah, it's better. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Instead of giving multivitamin syrup, you can try with iron syrup. Suppose the mild iron deficiency also will improve the appetite and improve the well-being of physical well-being also. The child will start eating. Instead of trying with multivitamin, you can try with iron.
Yes. At 2 to 5 years of age, they say like prophylactic iron 2 mg per kg once a day would be better. So only when the hemoglobin reflects as a low value, then we go for therapeutic iron.
Yeah, good.
2 growth spurts, 2 to 5, and then again around adolescence. More so in girls.
Dr. Ilamurugan, Vice President, any comments? Dr. Ilamurugan? Dr. Ilamurugan is there? Yeah. Okay. So we can. So on behalf of IIP TNSC, I thank for the nice, wonderful presentation by Dr. Geetanjali, and I think in subsequent days, Dr. Balasubramaniam and others, they will have find a date and they will take us. So definitely, it's 1 hour program, and it's definitely useful for the primary care pediatrician. I think it is a rollover another 3 or 4 months. It's actually a presidential action plan. I think it's a nice program. It's going on all over Tamil Nadu, over each zone. I think it definitely will be useful for everyone. Okay, thank you, one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.